So, but you can ignore all of that and just do nothing and struggle on through and you'll get by, you know. But the trouble with ignoring feelings of stress is that you feel tired. You know, it's tiring feeling stressed all the time. Your energy goes down, loss of stamina, you feel not so good and your relationships can get strained. And often what we do is we might, you know, have a few, you know, more beers or whatever, a few more shardies, in my case perhaps, to, no, don't put that on tape. But those things don't really help you to cope better. You know, they feel better on the moment, but the next day you're back in the same situation. So they're really not, they're not strategies to overuse, I guess. There's nothing better than sitting with friends and socialising and doing those sorts of things, but they're not strategies to overuse. Exercise is a really good thing. Exercise does all those things. It actually reduces fatigue, which seems counterintuitive. You think if I exercise, I'm going to get more tired, but the opposite appears to be the case. It reduces distress. You sleep better. Overall well-being is better. It helps with bone density, which is important if you're on hormone therapy, and it helps keep your weight under control, which is also important if you're on hormone therapy. There's a chap in Western Australia who's been doing a lot of this work with men with prostate cancer, and he's a big believer in gyms, and he thinks you've got to have the high intensity too. So they're all things to bear in mind. You can get Medicare scripts to exercise physiologists who you can go and see, and they can you know, give you a tailored program for yourself. And there's a lot of things you don't have to have a gym. There are these things called gym sticks that you can work out with, and a whole lot of things you can have in your home to make it easy for you. And of course there's walking and things around your neighbourhood. So that's just other things that relaxation training will do for you. Oops, too fast again. So I just want to flip back now to talking about couples, because we sort of talked about individuals and we talked about couples, and I've talked about things you can do to help yourself cope as an individual, which is really important. But there are also things that you can do as a couple. And bear in mind, I think, with all of this that, so you're going through an cancer experience, that's stressful. You can tend to stop doing things that are nourishing to your relationship, and you can stop talking about things the way you perhaps used to, just because there's so much on. So you can give yourself some little tips of things that you need to do. And one of the things is remembering to show care for each other. You know, just little things, because particularly if sex has become tough and that's all laden with anxiety and other things, and you can just stop remembering to just, you know, have a cuddle or a touch or get each other a cup of tea, or just do sweet things that show care and that nourish a relationship. You know, like it's like a bucket of water and bits have been falling out because you've been too busy with the cancer. You've got to fill the bucket back up. And even stuff like sit down and write each other a little list, or just share one thing with each other, that if you just did this one thing for me, that would make a real difference, and let the other person have a go at it. Because this is the other thing that we do know is common in couples, is mind reading. We're sure we know what's going on in the other person's head because we're married to them for 40 years, and I know exactly what he's thinking or she's thinking while they're doing the dishes. But in actual fact, we often can get it wrong. Now, it doesn't matter if you get it wrong if it's over silly, trivial things or things that don't really matter. But getting it wrong over things about cancer can lead to misunderstandings that are unhelpful. So sharing information with each other about, you know what, if you just did this one thing, that would be so great for me, because they're not necessarily going to know that you want that. Or sharing, you know, it's so irritating when you do this one thing. If you could just not do that, that would be great. And so negotiating some things like that in a kind of, sounds a little bit artificial. Oh, we've got some, I'm not doing that, faces come back at me. But I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's not just for cancer. I mean, for any relationship, this is what people should do, really. But if cancer, it's particularly important. So this is the other thing, is keeping some balance. And that is that not having it all being about the cancer all the time, and being able to be individuals. So supporting each other, but being your own person as well, and feeling like you can continue to do the things that are important for you as an individual as well. And again, times when you just ban talking about the cancer perhaps, or say, if it feels like the cancer's taking over everything, say we're going to talk about cancer once a week or twice a week for 30 minutes at this time. That's it, and then we're going to make ourselves focus on other things. Because it's really easy to get focused on the hard things. If you think about, you know, if someone's having a bad time at work, you know, and they constantly go on about it, and it gets a bit irritating in the end, because you just got to have a break from it. You need to talk about it and work it through, but you've got to have a break from it as well. So I just throw in professional services. I think it's really important to know that there are some really good people out there who do really good things in terms of helping people cope and manage a situation, learn new skills so that you can manage it better for yourself. So there are prostate cancer nurses who do a lot of this sort of thing, and there are psychologists. There'll be resources in your hospital, wherever your hospital is, that provide support and offer this sort of thing. You can ring the Cancer Helpline at the New South Wales Cancer Council and say, what have you got available? I think they do something where you can get counselling through them, and they script it out. And in Queensland, we run our own counselling service with clinical psychologists. So there's services all over the place, and it's worth taking them up. Men don't tend to take them up. I know in Queensland only about 20% of our clients are men, so it's not typically a bloke thing. But I think just think about it, because it can be really helpful. So what you can do to help yourself: utilise services that are appropriate to you, eat well, get exercise, talk to your doctor and consider counselling if you're feeling like it's getting on top of you. Relaxation training or mindfulness meditation or any of those things, give it a try and have a play with it. But make sure that you make time for fun too, to see your friends and go out and do things that are just enjoyable. And for couples, there's a little list. So take time regularly to talk about how you are both managing. But don't talk about cancer all the time. Schedule times to talk about that, and then focus on the other aspects of your life. Nominate for each other helpful and supportive things you can do for each other. So don't assume that your partner knows that you want this and they're just willfully refusing to do it. Let them know what it is that you would like. Think of yourselves as a team. If you work together as a team in the situation, it will be a lot less lonely and a lot easier for you to get through. Try not to mind read each other or make assumptions without evidence. A good way to challenge some of that, if you're thinking, she's just being difficult and doing X, Y, and Z, that's sort of like, you know, an overly negative thought. So you could say something like, you know what, when you do such and such, it makes me feel this way, and I'm wondering if we could talk about what's going on here. Just ways to, in a non-blaming way, bring things up. Be flexible in your approach to challenges or problems, and take time out just to have fun. So I just thought I would finish with a picture of the giraffe having a drink. So.
Well done, Suzanne.
Thanks, David.
Now, who's going to ask the first question? Obviously, they're very helpful suggestions, and Pam and I can relate to, I'd say, all of them, and we endorse them 100%. One of the things that we appreciate when we're dealing with people who have first been diagnosed with prostate cancer is to talk to them, exactly as you had up on the slides, about the different stages. First of all, coming to grips with the diagnosis, then deciding the treatment option, and keeping all these things sort of separate until they're well into that phase. That is a really important aspect of what we've got to do for people, isn't it?
Well, I think it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, so if you, even for yourself, it's like anything. If you've got something ahead of you and you think, oh, goodness me, how am I going to manage this situation? If you break it up into its bits and you go, right, I'm just going to do this bit. When I've got that bit done, I'll get on the next part.
Suzanne, I was just wondering, you're talking about coping and getting through all this, and you talked about the meditation and relaxation. Have you also looked at, from the perspective of people's faith-based, how that helps them stay centered or focused or gives them that encouragement, you know, no matter what the faith is? But have you looked at it from that? Has anything been done to look at that perspective and how that helps someone cope, or a couple cope through this process?
Well, I haven't looked at it specifically, but I would say, you know, personally, there's no question that, you know, if faith is important to you and that is a source of strength to you, then that's a marvellous thing. And I'm sure that within, you know, all the different faiths, there'd be support structures within that to help you through. So I don't know what the literature says about it, but that doesn't really matter. What's important is that if faith is important to you, then that's something that can give you strength as you go through this. I think all I would say is it's just important that people are sharing what they're doing as they're going along, that's all, and keep connected with each other. But absolutely.
Suzanne, it's all very well to sort of say when you're sitting here in the room and we're rational and saying that if you get emotional when you're in the emotional state, analyse things, be
Yeah.
rational. But when you're in that emotional state, the last thing you want to be is rational. And how do you bust out of that?
That's it. You're exactly right. I'm so glad you brought that up. So the trick to it is to pick your moment to start trying to work out what's going on in your head. So the moment of terror is not the moment to have a go at it. So you've just got to start with noticing. In a moment where you've got some peace and privacy, I guess. I'm feeling a bit anxious. What's going on in my head? And maybe have a notebook handy and try and jot them down. When you start to practice the skills of changing thoughts or doing meditation or doing relaxation, it is like learning to ride a bicycle. So expect that it's going to be some work and effort, and the time not to try that first off is when you're really feeling distressed. It's when you've noticed it, you're going to have a go at it. Particularly relaxation training, do that when you're not distressed. Start picking a time. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to take an hour out, and I've got a CD from the library, or I'm going to go to a class, and I'm just going to have a play at this. And then keep working on it and practicing those relaxation strategies when you're not stressed. And then when you are stressed, then you can flick into it more easily. So I agree with you entirely. That's the best way I can suggest. The other thing is, for some skills, it really is worth getting some lessons. You know, I've sat through a couple of mindfulness learning programs myself, because when we decided to do it, we flew up Elizabeth Foley, who's from Sydney, and she's a real expert in this, to teach us how to do it. And I sat through a few of them, and I found it quite hard to do. So I'm a person with a very busy head, and to try and calm your thoughts, I find that incredibly difficult. So I had to work at it, and I thought I was a bit of a failure at it, to be honest, but I still do apply it within my limitations. So it gets me into trouble sometimes. Here's a tip. When you're in a really boring meeting and you decide to do mindfulness and focus on the leaf outside, bad move. Someone asks you a question, you have no idea what they've been talking about. But it's worked really well for me in physical challenges where I've had to do climbing and things, and I've been really, really tired. And because in mindfulness, I'm not a mindfulness trainer, but you pick a thing and you focus on it, and that's how you kind of empty your thoughts. So that's why if you're sitting in a meeting and you're really wishing you were somewhere else, you can spot something outside the window and start noticing everything about that in a naive explorer kind of a way. And it empties your head of everything, which is not a good coping strategy for a meeting. But when I used it and it worked well, I was doing some climbing, and it was this mountain that felt and it was the middle of night, and it was dark, and it was horrible. And it wasn't horrible, it was great, but it was tough. And I thought, I'm never going to get to the top of that summit. I'm just never going to get there. And so then I thought, I know, I'll be mindful. So every rock I climbed, I just focused on that is a unique and special and beautiful rock. And before I knew it, I was at the top of the mountain. So then I rang up Elizabeth when I got back. I said, I'm not a failure. I applied it in a mountain climbing exercise and it worked.
On the same thing though, when it's a big issue, try and break it down into smaller bites and only deal with it sort of day by day rather than
Great
a monster.
advice.
You know, it's just a thought that when you're saying about concentrating on smaller things, bring the issues down to smaller things and then concentrate on that and then move on bit by bit.
I think that's excellent advice.
Okay, well, it remains for me to say thank you very much to Suzanne. I'd like you to put your hands together and thank her very much.